if you hit live, Firaz will request it happen, and then y'all two can do that part. Cool. All right, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I think we're good to go, Firaz. You want to start us off?
Oh, are we on Facebook already?
I think so. Let me just quickly check.
Yeah, we're there.
We are?
Yep. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone for tuning in to our second installment of True Believers. These are the Whispers of Shaitan. Today's topic is a little bit of a taboo topic, but inshallah, we're going to try our best to cover it. We're going to try doing it from 3 different aspects. And so from the first one that we're going to start with is, I'm going to go ahead and start with Sheikh Mubeen. How would you define an addiction?
The question is, so what is addiction, right? So how do you define addiction? I think addiction is anything that a person can't live without it, right? Am I addicted to my phone? Possibly, yeah. Am I addicted to, people are addicted to watching TV. People are addicted to anything that you can't live without of, that makes you feel uncomfortable, that makes you feel out of place. For me, that's an addiction, right? I was just talking to Siraj from YM about how there are some people that are addicted to Salah. Until they don't pray the Salah, they feel out of place. So that's how I would define addiction. Something that a person has to do, something that a person does on a regular basis, nonstop.
So at what point does an addiction become harmful for you?
I think being addicted to anything, right, besides spirituality, can become an obsession, right? So if your addiction becomes an obsession, that's where it becomes harmful, right? So once you can't cut yourself from it and unplug yourself from it, that's where it becomes harmful. If you can't become independent of that thing, right? Like for example, I think all 3 of us go to the gym. A lot of people are like addicted. Firaz, I know you hit it up every day, mashallah. This guy. But a lot of people are addicted to music in the gym, right? And if they don't have their earphones, I actually saw this one guy that was gonna come work out with me. He walked into the gym, and I was waiting for him to say salam. He turns around and leaves. I was like, what? What just happened? And then he comes back like 20 minutes later, and he goes, yeah, man, I forgot my headphones. So I said, you left because you forgot your headphones? He goes, yeah, I had to go home and get my headphones. I'm like, we wasted 20 minutes. So he goes, yeah. And I said, that's addiction. So addiction becomes harmful whenever you can't break yourself away from that thing. If you're able to break yourself away from that thing, if you are comfortable without it, then that's really not that bad of an addiction. Like, for example, our phones. If you leave your phone at home and you're okay, you're probably one of the most unique people that exists, right? Because everybody is addicted. We're addicted to our phones. And that's a very harmful thing. I remember not so long ago, I was like really, really good at directions. I'm still okay. But as a kid, people used to say that whenever I would see one route once, somebody take me to somewhere once, I would never, never, never forget it. Now that I'm older and I'm addicted to my phone, I'm addicted to Google Maps, I'm addicted to, Waves, I start to lose some of those qualities because I'm so dependent on my phone. I'm so dependent on something. So the question is, what is addiction? Addiction, of course, is anything that you do on a regular basis. When does addiction become harmful? When that addiction becomes an obsession and you can't do without it.
All right, so Mufti Nauman, let me ask you this. If you were to put a number on it, what would you think, how many youth do you think right now, let's say between the ages of 15 to 24, between the ages of 15 and 24, how much of them do you think smoke weed?
Man, it's up there. The number's up there for sure. It's tough to pinpoint like an exact number, but I want to say, it's probably 80%, 85%. And the reason why I give such a high number, right, is it's interesting because I was talking to my mom on a very similar topic. And just like this disconnect that often at times exists between parents that haven't really grown up in this environment versus, our youth that are currently coming up. And I gave my mom a real small example, and like that was enough to drive the point home. I was like, "Mom, did you know?" So my brother went to he went to high school 1 year, John Bound High School, which is like a really ratchet, really hood type of high school. And the reason was because he got transferred from madrasa, and we missed the deadline for him to get into our local high school, Francis Lewis, and so he had to go 1 year to John Bound. Now John Bound is super hood, right? And they have all types of stuff going on there. And I remember he came up to me and he had this conversation with me. He's like, man, there's kids that literally are in school and they have the brown bags and they'll have Arizona bottles, but inside the Arizona bottles, they'll have alcohol and nobody would know, right? And they'd be in school, a place where, no parent would ever think of anything like that happening. It's like, oh, my kid doesn't go to the club. My kid doesn't go here. It's like, they don't have to go to those places, but sometimes those things are brought to them, even in places where they have to be, things like school. So subhanAllah, even to the point of Sheikh Mubeen, it's like, first of all, there's that disconnect that exists. And then secondly, it's just realizing how to be able to navigate with all of these exterior things that we have, right? And what I mean by that is because Sheikh made a beautiful point. It's anything that's done in excess could be very detrimental, albeit something that's even permissible. Yeah. You can eat a cheeseburger and you'll be chilling, right? But make that a part of your daily diet, right? Thrice a day, and yeah, we'll see how long you
look like me.
I didn't say lift 400 pounds, Sheikh. I said cheese. Okay, so anything, even regardless of whether it's permissible, if done in excess, could be very detrimental. You can even look at things like ibadah. We used to have, Sheikh, I know you can even recall this, like our asatid, that like some of those kids that would become like fanat, right? And what that means is like they would like lose themselves, and all day, every day, they'd just be making ibadah. They'd have their tasbih beads and they're like making dhikr, and on the exterior, that's great, right? But sometimes shaitan can even utilize avenues of good, such as worship, and allow you to fall prey to this concept of addiction and overdoing something, right? And so that's why, subhanAllah, when we look at our ummah, there's a reason why we're considered as the middle path, wusla, right? Like moderation, right? It's not an excess, right? If you commit a sin, no, you're not gonna go to hell, right? Or it's not as simple as, oh, dismiss the sin in its totality, right? Those are both extremes. We say you make a sin, you commit a sin rather, you have the avenue of correcting that, right? But then there's also learning from that as well. So it's in every aspect of your life to have a sense of moderation, right? Now, kind of coming back to the question, in today's day and age, especially when around you, there's this kind of overwhelming, just normal notion of, it's totally fine, man. Everybody's doing it, so therefore it should be okay. And then what's really interesting about that is, you look at the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he gives us an understanding that this religion is something which is foreign, it's considered as strange, and there will come a time where it will go back to that original state as well. And that really draws the illustration that, there's going to be a time where if you're a Muslim, you're going to have to stand against the waves of whatever that's coming, whether it be futun, weed, women, pornography, the list can go on, right? And so that whole idea is there will come a time where there will be this wave and plethora of different things. How will you stand up against it, right? What have you done in your steps to be able to go against that tide, right? And so the number is staggering, you know, and the list can go on in different things too, whether it be alcohol addiction, whether it be, you know, drugs of any kind, right? It's having the understanding of those things. You're not going to put a stop to those things, right? They're always going to surround you and be around you. But number one, how many steps am I proactively taking to stay away from those things? Number one, like I give this example, like if I know that drinking is something that's wrong, right? But I keep a friend circle where there's about 3 or 4 people that find it totally normal to do so. And if in my presence, I'm okay allowing them doing that, even though I'm not doing it myself, yo, that's still something wrong. Why is it that your friends are so cool with you just being okay with those types of activities? I'm not saying judge someone because they're doing it, but like if you're constantly putting yourself in an environment and in a situation, there's a massive chance you're susceptible to falling prey to that same thing that you were involved in. That's why the Prophet ﷺ tells us, like, friendship is so important, right? The company that you keep, for example, right? If I keep good company, the examples like that of me going through Macy's and like the cologne section, right? I'm gonna come out smelling like something, right? Like Dior or Gucci or whatever the case is, right? Like Sheikh, you know, always smelling fresh. So I'm gonna come out smelling like something good, right? Because just I was surrounded by colognes and perfumes, right? Just good smell. But the opposite of that stands true as well. You ever pass by someone who's smoking a cigarette, and even just like the secondhand, you don't have to even smoke, right? Like subhanAllah, I had an uncle who just passed away because of like his abundance of just smoking. Yo, you used to go to his home. These are my cousins. You used to go to his home, and subhanAllah, dude, that house would be filled, right? And it just used to smell like cigarettes. You come out of that home, right? It's not that I partook in that, you know, action, but I came out with the effects on me. So it's also having that understanding that, okay, I know it's going to be around me, but how many steps am I taking to move away from that, right? And one basic example is like, if I have my friends that are totally cool with it and they're doing it, just because I'm not doing it doesn't mean that that's going to last forever, yo. You know, because it could be a time where I'll be right in that same equation, you know, Allah forbid. And that's a lot of times what typically happens, right? Hey, man, just try it once. It won't hurt, right? And then that once is that twice. And it's just like your whole mindset. It went from, oh, it's not okay, to it being like, there ain't nothing wrong with it. And then you take that home to your parents, and then there's the disconnect and the fights and then the arguments, right? Because like, where did it all start off, right? I know a lot of like the youth would be like, man, my parents just don't understand, right? Yeah, sometimes there are cases, right, where parents are not understanding, and we agree, but usually there's a lot of pretext behind a lot of those situations and scenarios, right? Like where that, we're not talking about children here, we're talking about young men and women, right? It's in your discretion to be able to understand and to navigate accordingly. And so, yeah, subhanAllah, that number is real staggering. But what we have at our disposal are just those key steps on how you navigate, right? Like the iPhone, right? Sheikh repped his nice looking iPhone, man, right? The iPhone 11, I see you there, right? So they have that feature of what is it? Screen time, I think it's called.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you get to break down every single hour that you spent on all your different platforms, right? And I really like looking at it because I think to myself, like, how did I spend 7 hours this past week scrolling through Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or whatever the case might have been, right? And it really gives you that kind of like image of like, okay, cool. You can't fix something if you have no idea about it, right? So at least start off with getting some sort of image. Okay, now I have a roadmap of how I want to combat this. So
by the way, alhamdulillah, my screen time is down 14% than last week.
Nice,
mashallah. So you're gone from what, like 100 minutes down to like 84 minutes?
I
right?
was
6
100
minutes.
minutes a day, I'd be so happy. I would be so happy. But Mufti, I just want to add a few points. I think you made some really good points. I think one of the points is that our deen is not about extremes, right? Our deen is about being taking that middle route. And that's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was 3 people who came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and one had said that, I'm going to pray salah throughout the night.
Right.
The one person, I'm going to fast every single day. The person said, I'm never going to go to my wife. I'm not going to have a relationship with my wife. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, no. You know what? Some days I sleep, some days I stay awake. Some days I go to my spouse, some days I don't. Some days I fast and some days I don't. And the Prophet ﷺ teaches us moderation here. And I think as a second really important point that you had made was, we have to understand the Muslim community, or not even Muslim community, even in our household, a lot of times we make artificial exceptions that it can't happen to me, it can't happen to my family or my community or my children. That's BS.
Yeah.
Right? I'm gonna call it, right? So immediately we say, well, okay, non-Muslims, yeah, they might be really addicted to that stuff, but Muslim kids, nah, it's not gonna happen. Or I think for us, the question you put forward is weed, right? And I think weed is definitely a huge problem. Again, I grew up in a town in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, where our town was a dry county. You couldn't buy alcohol, right? And because you couldn't buy alcohol, what ended up happening? All the kids are smoking weed, right? So because you couldn't buy alcohol and you could get a dime bag, everybody was out there smoking weed, and even the Muslim kids. But people had this like artificial exception that no, it's not my community. No, the Muslim kids, no, of course not. My beta? No, absolutely not. Right? But reality is that those exceptions don't exist. So that's one thing. I think understanding that your child is still human, understanding that other Muslims are still human and we fight temptations as well, is a huge reality. It's a rude awakening that people have to get on. That my child may be wrong, or my child may be engaged in something, and if they are, then I need to be able to help them instead of just deny it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, Sheikh, because that's such a wonderful point. And I think that's so like prevalent within our societies. And when you carry that kind of mindset, that we're exempt from this, it can't happen, right? It's like the ostrich theory. What does an ostrich do when it detects any harm? Yeah, it buries its head in the ground. And the idea behind it is that, okay, if I can't see the imminent threat, therefore it's non-existent, right? So I think a lot of times parents really do this massive disservice to themselves, thinking that we can't be affected or it can't happen to us. And when it does happen, Allah forbid, and again, like it's common, right? So, but for that person who never imagined it happening that way, once it does, you feel like the whole world is crashing down, and it becomes much harder to come up with a solution. Because like, right? Like right? So it's like this whole list of things. But it's like, man, you really could have just changed your mindset. And that could have really altered the course of action thereafter you took. And so that's a wonderful point, man.
But so regarding the mindset, right? I think we got about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to touch on about 2 or 3 different points.
10 minutes left?
Yeah, it's 30 minutes long, right?
Dang. We can go over a little bit. I mean,
does Mufti Nauman have to be somewhere after?
Arabi, man, I got to slip a permission, sign a permission slip from him before.
He's not on the chat. He's not on the stream today, so we're good.
So
last week, go on.
Very clearly, he's like, listen, man, I'm not gonna have to call you, right? I was like, listen, I'm gonna be there. You don't have to remind me. Yeah. So,
So, but as in regards to, Sheikh Mubeen, you mentioned that, you used to live in a dry county. So, alcohol wasn't available. So the next thing was everyone went for weed.
Mhm.
But we also know that back then weed wasn't legal in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that's guaranteed is probably within the next year or two, marijuana is going to be legalized across the country. And a question that gets asked a lot is, well, if it's legal in America, why is it not halal? I mean, obviously, if it's legal, then there's nothing wrong. I can just do it. With that mindset, I think that parents are going to fall into kind of this trap where they're going to have to be trying to explain to their kids why it's not allowed. Kind of like how our parents might have had to explain why alcohol wasn't allowed, right? It was banned for them, but then it became available post-prohibition. Speaking to us, they said, okay, alcohol is haram and these are the reasons, but weed never really came up in those discussions. Now it's a daily occurrence.
Yeah.
So the first of the three things I want to talk about is, if it's legal in America, why is it haram?
Okay, so first off, let's look at this, and I think you answered this question yourself, because you said how alcohol, which is legal, but yet it's haram, right? So they're legalizing weed now, but alcohol has always been legal. But we clearly know the effects of alcohol. We clearly know the harms of alcohol, and that's why Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has prohibited. The second thing that that's important to understand, we were talking about this in our Safa class this just yesterday, that as society progresses, we change our norms. We change what's okay, what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, right? So our discussion in Safa class was about homosexuality, and how until 1970, right, in England, it was classified as a mental disease, right?
Yeah.
Just having homosexuality thoughts. But then society goes, no, let's change it up a little bit. Let's make it okay, right? And slowly, they made it okay. And now the person who isn't on board with it, that person is backwards. So I think that, when you look at society, over time, society will keep changing things, and it will keep legalizing things and keep making things okay. And the reason why they make it okay is because everybody is jumping on board. And the reason why everybody is jumping on board, because we live in a society where everybody is looking for that next high, the next level entertainment. You look at pornography, and pornography is such a crazy industry that you get people that watch just porn, and then they go to the next level and the next level, and this finish and that finish, and this crazy thing and that kink. So you look at human behavior, and we're always looking for the next thing. And I definitely think that once we make weed accessible and completely legal, people they're not just going to stop at weed. It's a gateway drug, right? That's what they call it, a gateway drug. And then we will move to the next thing in line, and it's just going to keep going. So to answer the question that, okay, if it becomes legalized and you can buy on everywhere. I actually, right before the lockdown, I was driving to Chicago, and I didn't know that Illinois has it legal. It's legal there. And as soon as I crossed the border, like, all the signs like completely changed.
Right.
Before, you got signs of like Big Macs and Whoppers, and now you got signs for like for a dime bag, and call this and this therapy and that therapy, and Ace, God knows everything, right? And it hit me that because it's completely okay there, it's all the way out in the open. There's no hiding from it. And if the next few years, it's going to be the same thing all across America.
Yeah.
But that doesn't change your fundamental issues with it.
Right.
Our fundamental issues with homosexuality doesn't change. Our fundamental issues with anything that tomorrow society tells us it's okay now it doesn't change. So I moved up. You're saying something?
No, I think that's absolutely beautiful point, you know. But to kind of add to that, I think we need to kind of also take a step back, and you know, you made this point as well. Just because something is legal, that doesn't change what my values and what my moral compass was, right? Or what my governing body was and who I answer to. And what I mean by that is, I think the reason why it was easy for us to stay away from things like alcohol was there was a level of understanding and communication that we had throughout our entire lives. I've known friends, right? And I've met people. They're like, yeah, they'll do everything in the book, X, Y, and Z. You put a plate of pork in front of them, they'll be like, brother, astaghfirullah, what are you talking about? Right? But then in their cup, they have like Ciroc or whatever, but you know, like put pork in front of them, astaghfirullah. But the beauty of that though is very early on, there's just this sense of communication and understanding that has to be developed, right? And so whether it be for any youth that are watching or any parents that are watching, it's twofold, right? That conversation needs to happen from the parents as well in terms of education and, you know, and being open and candid. And then there needs to be somewhat of an understanding from the side of the youth as well. And only then when there's that type of communication can there be any good that emanates from it, right? And so like I think the reason why like Muslims are so quick to be like, no, alcohol, I can never, right? Regardless, right, of how practicing that person is, they just have it kind of like etched in themselves, right? It's ingrained in a way, like you can't take it out. And so I think like a lot of these conversations, we've never really expected to have them, but you know, subhanAllah, it's the climate that we're in. And sure, even though it is legalized, Sheikh made the point, alcohol been legalized, but that never changed my moral compass and who I was, right? So kind of back to that same hadith of Prophet ﷺ, times are always going to continue changing. Science is always going to continue evolving. Who knew the benefit of sitting down and drinking water, for just example, right? But now like you find tons of articles like of all the health benefits that are there, right? Or and the list goes on, right? And so we understand that there's this ever evolving transition, whether it be on a government level, on a scientific level, but one thing that's a consistent and that stays the same from the day that we got it was this moral compass that we have in Islam, like the values that we have, right? The preachings and the teachings that we have, and who at the end of the day I respond to, right? And so sure, it is legal, but you know, that'll change like who I am and who I respond to, right? So
Right. And we actually, so I do another podcast on Saturdays, and one of the recent guests that we had was Fahad Taslim. And so one thing that he was talking about was how Islam's kind of like your moral compass. And so what he was talking about was that, okay, let's say you went back into the 1800s and you were in the 1800s and slavery was completely legal. You as a Muslim, would you be able to support it? And so the obvious answer is no. But the thing is that just because it was legal in America doesn't mean that your religion supports it. And so I think that was a good way of putting yourself into those shoes and being able to differentiate and contextualize it. So with that being said, what's that, Sheikh Mubeen?
So I mean, I think that, you know, we touched on the same thing, that homosexuality, you know, when you look at it, it's being completely legal and completely fine. Am I going to support it? Absolutely not, because my moral compass of my deen, my religion, you know, goes against it. But you know, I think you had asked a question earlier that about the percentage of Muslims that are engaged in weed, or that smoke weed. And I always look at England as like an older brother to America when it comes to religion. And the reason being is that Islam has been there for much longer. There's second, third generation. We're still like, you know, first generation, maybe second generation right now. And when you look at how Muslims are there, there's a lot of lessons to be learned. It could possibly be our future here in America if we don't do things properly. And I look at Muslims there, and I remember, like, you know, one time on Eid, I was in Manchester and we went to Windsor Road. Windsor Road is like the Divan. We don't got Divan here in Dallas, but everybody knows what Divan is, right?
It's like the Almarcas, but like an entire street of Almarcas is.
Yes, the entire street of America. There you go. We went to Windsor Road, and it was Eid, and everybody was going crazy, right? I mean, they're driving up and down the road, they're honking their horns. It was like what what is this? And I remember clearly that there are Muslims celebrating Eid with cans of beer in their hand, chugging it back out on the street, open. And for me, that's like, again, being an 18-year-old and seeing that as a real eye-opener, that when Islam has been in one place for so long, the Muslims start to acclimate themselves to the non-Muslims, and they pick up habits, and and it is human nature because those temptations hit us as well. And if we project a few years down the line, just like England, majority of the drug dealers in England are Desi, are Muslim. They're people that are from the same countries that we're from, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, from the Middle East. So I look at America and I ask myself, what can we do to prevent ourselves heading down that same road? Where alcohol becomes very normal. And I think right now it is very normal. And if you step out of a very a small group of masjid going people, right? The common Muslim American, one thing we have to understand, the circle that we're around at the masjid is not the common Muslim American. The common Muslim American maybe comes to the masjid once a week, but there are some that don't come at all. And in those circles, I think alcohol is very, very, it's an okay thing. And at so many times when we do marriage counseling, a lot of wives open up and say, my husband drinks, and he's been drinking for years. So I look at America and I say, if we don't, kind of start changing our direction, then we will be like England in a few years, where once it becomes legalized here on top, our Muslim kids will start dealing. What's going to stop them? To get their own high, they're going to start, selling weed as well.
Right. And I think in today's episode, we did a good job at addressing what the issue is. And so I'm hoping for next week, maybe we can spend about the first 10 minutes attacking the issue, kind of talking about what are different things that we can do inside the community. And that comes from, being someone who might be a religious authority like yourself or Mufti Nauman, being a parent in the community, or being the person who takes part of it or just has friends who take part of it. How to address those issues and how to, just essentially lift everyone around us.
Honestly, I wish we could do that right now because I think it's a very, very important topic. But inshallah, maybe next week, so again, today we addressed the issue, accepting the issue that yes, a huge part of the Muslim community is smoking weed, a huge part of the community is drinking, and I kid you not, and I probably shouldn't say this in public, but I actually know of a person who grew up in a very religious environment, right? As a hafiz, who fell in the wrong company, and he ended up doing some very hardcore drugs,
right?
Very hardcore drugs, which it had him admitted in the psych ward. Wow. And they said that he will always have those effects. Alhamdulillah, he's doing much better now. But again, it's that mentality of not accepting,
right?
Building false exceptions. Mm-hmm. Oh, it can't happen. It can't happen. So I think we did a great job understanding and kind of addressing that. Yes, it absolutely can happen. And it absolutely is happening. A huge part of our community is drinking. A huge part of our community is, smoking weed, just like any other sin.
Right.
We are engaged. I think Mufti Nauman made it really cool, very bluntly said that as Muslims, pork was like a never okay kind of thing. And if there is somebody that engages in that, then that's a battle that they have to fight with Allah, with their nafs, and inshallah we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it easy for that person. But then alcohol was like a very taboo thing. Where pork was like a very no thing, alcohol was like a very taboo thing.
Right.
People drank, but they never spoke about it. It was always hidden. And I think even in a lot of Muslim countries, right, you can get alcohol. I remember once we were in Madinah Munawwarah, and me and my brother, we had to go somewhere, and we pulled up over there in Hajj time. Every car's a taxi, so we put our hand out. This car stops. I look in the driver's seat. It's like a 16-year-old kid, and he's like, "Yeah, hop in." So we go, "Okay." Now we're talking to the 6-year-old kid, asking them how's life here in Medina, mashallah, this, that, and he says to me that y'all are from America, and what you have there, anything that you have there, we have it here. Anything that goes on there, hand out this. He goes, the only difference is y'all do it out in the open, and we do it behind closed doors. So I think that's the reality of alcohol. That's the reality of weed. It's just a very taboo topic that we don't address and we don't touch, right? But it is there. And inshallah, next week, like you said, we'll inshallah talk about some different ways that we can tackle it as a community, as parents, as leaders, what we can do, and even for people who they themselves are struggling with something like this, because we understand that anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibits in Islam is harmful for us. He doesn't just prohibit things, but there is a we are losing out, and that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. قُلْ فِيهِمَا إِسْمٌ كَبِيرٌ وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ. Know that there is a benefit, but a harm in it as well. وَإِسْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا. But that the harm is greater than the benefit. So there is definitely a harm in this. So if there is somebody that again struggling with this, inshallah, we call you to our next week's program. Inshallah, we'll talk about the struggles that that person faces, and inshallah, ways that we can help and kind of fight through this.
Inshallah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I also would love to share experiences. I had a chance when I was in South Africa, because your story kind of reminded me of that a little bit. We visited like rehabilitation centers, right? And this isn't like, I'm not talking about just any random rehabilitation center. This was a Muslim rehabilitation center, just filled with a bunch of youth. And they have great ones here, like the Khalil Center. And we don't have to go overseas, but I mean, I would love to share those experiences because till this day, they kind of still ring in my head. But yeah, I think today we did a great job. The first step to any problem solving is essentially highlighting and understanding that there is a problem to begin with. Yes. So I think we did a great job at that. And inshallah, next week, let's jump into this a little bit more.
Inshallah. Sheikh Mubeen, you want to end us with a dua?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask that you break us from any addiction that we might have. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask that you purify our hearts. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask that you keep us addicted to you. That you make us people that are dependent on you only. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask that you connect our hearts to you. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if there's anybody in our community who's struggling through any of these diseases and illnesses, oh Allah, we ask that you rid them of those diseases and illnesses, that you make it easy for them, that you help them break the addictions. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask that you keep our community clean and pure. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask that you give us pure hearts. Oh Allah, we ask that you give us hearts that accept right as right and wrong as wrong. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, protect us from becoming people that just say everything's okay. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask for your pleasure. And we ask for those deeds that make you pleasure, that make you pleased. Oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we ask that you forgive our sins. Oh Allah, we seek protection from the fire of Jahannam and ask for Jannah for those. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun al mursalin walhamdulillahi.
Ameen. Alrighty, y'all. Inshallah, look forward to
seeing. ARB's here. So you gotta go, man.
Assalamu alaikum, guys.
Everybody, again, Mufti Nauman, Firaz bhai, and everybody who attended. Inshallah, we plan to bring other issues that we want to keep it real. things that can't be said, things that people are thinking about. Again, this is why we call this program True Believers, because we want to tackle some of the issues and become true believers and fight the whispers of shaitan. Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah,